The conference room went silent. Every executive froze mid-laugh, their faces draining of color as the words hung in the air like a death sentence. Just seconds ago, they'd been mocking the janitor mopping in the corner, the single dad in a worn uniform who smelled of pine sol and defeat. They'd called him pathetic, a failure, wondered aloud how someone so worthless could even afford to feed his kid. But now, the woman standing at the head of the table, the CEO they'd all been trying to impress, had just said 3 words that shattered their world. "That's my husband." What happened next would change everything. This is the story of how one man's secret became everyone's reckoning, and how the worst day of several lives became the best lesson they'd ever learn. He pushed his yellow cleaning cart down the marble hallway of the executive floor, the wheels squeaking softly in rhythm with his thoughts. Through his worn uniform shirt, he could feel the weight of his daughter Lily's latest drawing tucked into his front pocket, a crayon masterpiece of the 2 of them holding hands under a rainbow. She'd given it to him that morning at breakfast, her gap-toothed smile beaming with pride. "It's us being happy, Daddy," she'd said, and something in his chest had cracked and mended at the same time. Marcus was 36 but felt 50. The last 2 years had weathered him in ways that showed in the gray threading through his black hair and the permanent exhaustion etched around his eyes. Losing his wife Sarah to cancer had been the earthquake. Losing his high-profile career as a software engineer 6 months later, when grief made him miss deadlines and lose focus, had been the aftershock. And then came the avalanche, mounting medical debt, selling their home, moving to a 1-bedroom apartment where Lily slept in the bedroom and he took the couch, choosing between electricity bills and groceries. The job at Hartwell had been a lifeline, even if it paid a fraction of what he used to make. Even if it meant scrubbing toilets in the same building where he once pitched million-dollar ideas. Even if it meant watching former colleagues walk past him without recognition, their eyes sliding over him like he was part of the furniture. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. Lily needed stability, needed food, needed her dad to hold it together. So he mopped floors and emptied trash bins and became a ghost. He approached Conference Room A, where the senior leadership team was gathering for their weekly strategy meeting. Through the glass walls, he could see them filing in. Men and women in tailored suits carrying leather portfolios and confidence like shields. He recognized some faces from his previous life, though none of them recognized him. He waited a moment, hoping they'd settle so he could slip in, do his work, and disappear. But Jennifer Park, the VP of Operations, spotted him and waved him in impatiently. "Make it quick," she said, without looking at him, her attention already on her phone. "We're starting in 5. Marcus nodded, though she didn't see it, and entered with his cart. He began in the far corner, moving efficiently, trying to become even smaller than usual. The executives barely registered his presence as they chatted, laughed, and jockeyed for position around the massive conference table. He was furniture, wallpaper, nothing. Did you see the CEO's memo?" Brian Holloway, the CTO, was saying as he settled into his chair. "She's on some crusade about workplace culture and seeing the humanity in everyone. What's next? Trust falls and drum circles?" Scattered laughter rippled around the table. Marcus kept mopping, his movement steady and mechanical. He'd learned to tune out these conversations. They weren't meant for him. He didn't exist to them. "Easy for her to preach from her ivory tower," Jennifer added, scrolling through emails. "She probably hasn't had an actual conversation with anyone below director level in years. It's all corporate theater." Marcus moved to empty the trash can near the wall. Almost done. Just a few more minutes and he could leave. "Speaking of theater," Brian continued, his voice dripping with amusement, "check out our janitor friend over there." "Dude, you reek of chemicals. Do they not teach you about ventilation?" Heat crept up Marcus's neck, but he kept working. This wasn't the first time, wouldn't be the last. "Invisible," he reminded himself. "Just finish and go." "I heard he's got a kid," someone else chimed in. Marcus thought it was Derek from finance, but he didn't look up to check. "Single dad, can you imagine? Kid's probably eating ramen every night while dad here pushes a mop. Real winner we've got maintaining our building." The laughter was louder now. Marcus's hands tightened on the mop handle, his knuckles white. Lily's drawing seemed to burn against his chest. He thought of her this morning, proudly showing him the rainbow, telling him about her day at school, believing with complete faith that her daddy was a hero because that's what good dads did. They protected their children from knowing how broken they felt inside. I mean, how do you even end up like that? Jennifer mused, genuine curiosity in her voice, as if Marcus weren't standing 15 feet away. What kind of life choices lead to mopping floors at 30-something when you've got a mouth to feed? It's honestly kind of pathetic. Probably drugs, Brian suggested casually. Or gambling. Nobody ends up pushing a broom unless they screwed up monumentally. Or maybe just lazy, Derek added. Some people just don't have ambition. They're content to be mediocre, to let life happen to them instead of taking control. And then they wonder why they're struggling. The words hit Marcus like physical blows, each one finding a bruise he'd been nursing in private. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. The mop handle creaked under his grip. He wanted to scream, to tell them about Sarah's hospital room, where she'd made him promise to take care of their baby girl no matter what. To explain that he'd lost everything trying to honor a dying woman's final wish while keeping a 6-year-old from falling apart. To make them understand that he had 2 engineering degrees and had once designed software they probably used every day. But he didn't. Because he couldn't afford to lose this job. Because pride wouldn't pay for Lily's asthma medication or her school supplies. Because invisible men don't talk back. I bet he doesn't even have custody, Jennifer continued, warming to her cruelty. Probably sees the kid every other weekend, shows up broke and broken, disappointing everyone around him. Marcus's vision blurred. He blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. Not here, not in front of them. He abandoned the mop and moved toward his cart, ready to escape, to breathe, to survive this moment like he'd survived all the others. God, I'd die if I ended up like that, someone said. What's even the point? The door opened before Marcus could respond, before he could leave, before he could do anything but stand there with his shame on full display. And everything stopped. Sarah Chen walked into the conference room like she owned it, which technically she did. At 41, she commanded attention without demanding it. Tall and composed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month. Her black hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, her expression neutral but her dark eyes missing nothing. The executives scrambled to attention, chairs scraping, spines straightening, smiles appearing like masks. Marcus's world tilted sideways. He stared at her, and for one horrible, wonderful moment, their eyes met. He saw the recognition there, saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, then pain, then something harder and more deliberate. She'd known he was working here. She'd known for months. But seeing him like this, hearing what she'd just heard, that was new. Good morning, Sarah said, her voice calm and professional as she moved to the head of the table. Please sit. They sat. Marcus stood frozen by his cart, suddenly more visible than he'd been in months, though for all the wrong reasons. He wanted to disappear into the floor, to undo the last 5 minutes, to be anywhere but here. I apologize for running late, Sarah continued, setting down her portfolio. Her gaze swept the room, landing briefly on each executive before moving on. I was reviewing the workplace culture audit that HR completed last week. Fascinating reading. Really illuminates how we treat our people. All of our people. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Jennifer shifted uncomfortably. Brian's smirk faded. Before we begin our strategy discussion, Sarah said, her tone still professionally pleasant, I wanted to address something I overheard as I approached. Comments about one of our facility's staff members. Comments about his life choices, his worth, his fitness as a parent. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs. No, please don't do this. He didn't need rescue. He needed invisibility. He needed this to be over. I want to be very clear about something, Sarah continued. She wasn't raising her voice, but somehow the room got quieter, smaller, her words filling every corner. Every person who works in this building, from the executive suite to facilities to the mailroom, deserves basic human dignity and respect. That's not corporate theater, Jennifer. That's the bare minimum of being a decent person. Jennifer's face flushed crimson. Around the table, executives studied their hands, the ceiling, anything but Sarah or Marcus. But what troubles me most, Sarah said, and now there was an edge to her voice sharp enough to draw blood, is how comfortable you all felt making those assumptions. How easily you reduced a human being to a punchline without knowing a single thing about him, his story, or what brought him here. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it screamed. Marcus couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The man you were just mocking, Sarah said quietly. The one you called pathetic and lazy and a failure? That's my husband. The words landed like a bomb. The room didn't just go silent, it went airless. Faces drained of color. Eyes went wide. Brian's mouth literally fell open. Jennifer made a small, strangled sound in her throat. Derek looked like he might be sick. Marcus closed his eyes. This was worse than being invisible. This was being seen in the worst possible way. Not as himself, but as an extension of his wife's power. As proof of executive connection. As something that mattered only because of who he was married to. The shame of it burned hotter than anything they'd said before. His name is Marcus Chen, Sarah continued, and there was something fierce in her voice now, protective and furious in equal measure. 2 years ago, he nursed my predecessor, his first wife, through stage 4 cancer while working full-time and caring for their 6-year-old daughter alone. He held her hand while she died. He made sure their child didn't watch her mother waste away. He shouldered debt that would crush most people because he refused to let Sarah, his Sarah, not me, die without the best possible care. Marcus heard someone inhale sharply. He kept his eyes closed, Lily's drawing pressed against his heart like a talisman. After she passed, Marcus tried to hold his life together, Sarah said. But grief doesn't care about deadlines or performance reviews. He lost his job as a senior software engineer, a job where he made 3 times what most of you make, Brian. He lost his house. He lost almost everything except his daughter and his determination to give her a stable life. Ms. Chen, Jennifer began, her voice small and horrified. You didn't know, Sarah finished for her. Exactly, you didn't know, and yet you felt qualified to judge, to mock, to reduce a man's entire existence to a failure based on his job title and uniform. She moved around the table slowly, deliberately, making eye contact with each person. Marcus took this job because it offered consistent hours that aligned with his daughter's school schedule, because it provided health insurance for a child with asthma, because it was honest work that let him be present for his kid while keeping a roof over their heads. He took this job because he's a good father who prioritizes his child's needs over his ego. Marcus finally opened his eyes and found Sarah looking directly at him. There was apology there, and anger on his behalf, but also something else. Respect. She wasn't trying to rescue him. She was trying to make them see him. As for how we know each other, Sarah said, turning back to the executives, Marcus and I met 8 months ago at a parent-teacher conference. Both single parents, both trying to figure out how to rebuild after loss. I'd lost my husband 2 years prior in a car accident. We understood each other's grief. We became friends, then more. We've been married for 3 months. The shock rippled through the room again. They'd had no idea. Sarah Chen kept her personal life fiercely private, and Marcus had insisted on keeping their relationship separate from work. He'd wanted to succeed or fail on his own merits, not as the CEO's husband. Now that independence felt stupid and pointless. I didn't tell anyone here because Marcus asked me not to, Sarah continued. He wanted to be treated like everyone else. He wanted to earn respect through his work, not through association with me. And what did he get instead? Contempt. Cruelty. Judgment from people who wouldn't last a day walking in his shoes. Brian found his voice first, stammering. Ms. Chen, I am so profoundly sorry. I had no idea, and that's no excuse, but please know I would never... Never what? Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp. Never mock someone if you knew they were connected to power? That's exactly the problem, Brian. Human decency shouldn't be conditional. You shouldn't need to know someone's story or their connections to treat them with basic respect. She returned to the head of the table, her posture radiating disappointment. Here's what's going to happen. Each of you will personally apologize to Marcus. A real apology, not corporate damage control. Then you're going to think very carefully about how you treat every single person in this building, regardless of their title or position. And if I ever hear of anything like this happening again, we'll be having a very different conversation about your futures here. Jennifer stood on shaking legs. Marcus, Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. There's no excuse. I was cruel and small, and I'm ashamed. I'm truly, deeply sorry. One by one, they stood and apologized. Some were clearly terrified, focused on saving their jobs. But others, Marcus could see it in their eyes, were genuinely horrified at themselves. Derek had tears running down his face as he stammered out his remorse. A younger executive named Priya, who'd been mostly silent during the mockery, apologized for not speaking up, for being complicit through her silence. Marcus accepted each apology with a nod, his voice trapped somewhere in his chest. He didn't trust himself to speak. This was too much, too raw, too public. He felt exposed and validated and humiliated all at once. When the last apology had been offered, Sarah dismissed them. They fled the conference room like it was on fire, leaving Marcus and Sarah alone among the scattered papers and abandoned coffee cups. The silence that followed felt enormous. I'm sorry, Sarah said quietly, moving toward him. I know you didn't want this, but I couldn't. I couldn't listen to them tear you apart and stay silent. I couldn't let them reduce you to nothing when you're everything. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out rough and unsteady. I didn't need rescuing. I know, Sarah said. You're the strongest person I've ever met, Marcus. You don't need anyone to fight your battles, but that doesn't mean you should have to fight them alone. Something broke loose in Marcus's chest, some wall he'd been building brick by brick for 2 years. His eyes burned and his throat tightened, and suddenly Sarah's arms were around him, and he was crying into her shoulder, great gasping sobs that had been waiting for permission to escape. She held him tightly, one hand cradling the back of his head, murmuring words he couldn't quite hear but felt in his bones. I'm so tired, he whispered against her suit jacket. I'm so tired of pretending I'm okay, of being invisible, of feeling like I'm failing everyone. You're not failing anyone, Sarah said fiercely. You're surviving impossible circumstances with grace. You're raising a beautiful, happy child who knows she's loved. You're doing it, Marcus. Every single day you're doing it. They stood there for a long time, Marcus putting himself back together piece by piece, while Sarah held the space for him to break. Eventually he pulled back, wiping his eyes with the heel of his hand, embarrassed by his red face and running nose. Sarah handed him a tissue from her portfolio, her expression soft. I can't keep working here, Marcus said. Not after this. They'll never see me the same way. You're right, Sarah agreed. They'll see you better. They'll see you as the person who taught them something crucial about their own humanity. But if you want to leave, I support that too. Whatever you need. Marcus looked around the conference room. The gleaming table, the expensive chairs, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He thought about the last 4 months of invisibility, of swallowing his pride and his pain, of choosing survival over dignity. Then he thought about Lily's drawing in his pocket, about the rainbow she'd colored with such hope. I need to think about it, he said finally. But not here, not today. Take the week off, Sarah said immediately. Paid. Spend it with Lily. Breathe. We'll figure out the rest together. Marcus nodded, then paused. Did you mean it? What you said about me being everything? Sarah smiled, really smiled, and it transformed her face from CEO to the woman he'd fallen in love with over terrible coffee at parent-teacher conferences and late-night conversations about grief and hope. Every word. You're my partner, Marcus, in all things. Your struggles are my struggles. Your battles are my battles. And your victories, like surviving today, like raising that amazing kid, like getting up every morning even when it feels impossible. Those are my victories too. Something settled in Marcus then, some piece clicking into place. He wasn't invisible. He never had been, not really. He'd just been looking for validation in the wrong places, from people whose opinions didn't matter. What mattered was Lily's gap-toothed smile and Sarah's fierce belief in him, and his own stubborn determination to keep going. "I love you," he said, meaning it with everything he had. "I love you too," Sarah replied. "Now go home. Hug our daughter. Make her that terrible grilled cheese she loves where you burn the edges. Be present for your life instead of just surviving it." Marcus gathered his cart, but before he left, he pulled Lily's drawing from his pocket and handed it to Sarah. "She made this for me this morning, said it's us being happy." Sarah studied the crayon rainbow, the two stick figures holding hands, and her eyes went bright with unshed tears. "She's right, you know. We are happy. Not perfect, not easy, but happy. That's more than most people get." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, feeling lighter than he had in months. "It really is." He left the conference room with his cart, but this time he wasn't invisible. He was seen, truly seen, and that made all the difference. As he pushed toward the elevator, he passed several executives from the meeting. They met his eyes now, acknowledging him with nods that carried weight and meaning. He nodded back, not as an inferior or a ghost, but as an equal, as a person. When he got home an hour later, Lily launched herself at him from the couch, cartoon playing forgotten in the background. "Daddy, you're home early." Marcus caught her, lifting her high and spinning her around until she squealed with laughter. "I am. I thought we could do something special today. What do you want to do?" "Park," Lily shouted immediately. "And then ice cream. And then you can help me make a new rainbow picture, but this time with 3 people because now we have Sarah too." "3 people it is," Marcus said, setting her down and crouching to her level. He studied her face, Sarah's dark eyes, his stubborn chin, a smile that could light up the darkest room. His miracle, his reason, his everything. "You know what, baby girl? We're going to be just fine." "I know, Daddy," Lily said matter-of-factly, patting his cheek with her small hand. "We're always fine. We have each other." And there it was, the truth he'd been too tired and broken to see. They were fine, not because of his job title or his bank account or what strangers thought of his choices. They were fine because they had love and resilience and the stubborn determination to keep showing up for each other no matter what. That evening, after the park and ice cream and creating a new rainbow picture with 3 stick figures under a purple sky, Marcus sat on the couch while Lily slept in the bedroom. He pulled out his phone and texted Sarah a photo of the new drawing. Her response came immediately. "Perfect. All of it. See you tomorrow?" "Counting on it," Marcus replied. "We're making dinner. Lily's requesting her famous spaghetti, which is just regular spaghetti, but she adds extra cheese." "My favorite," Sarah texted back. "I'll bring dessert. And Marcus? Today was hard, but you handled it with grace. I'm proud of you." Marcus stared at those words. "I'm proud of you," and felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Not shame or exhaustion or grief, but something warmer and more solid. Pride in himself. Pride in surviving. Pride in building a life worth living from the ruins of the one he'd lost. He'd been a ghost for 4 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. Tomorrow he'd start being visible again, not as a janitor or a CEO's husband or a cautionary tale, but as Marcus Chen, father, survivor, engineer, human being. A man who'd learned that dignity doesn't come from job titles or other people's respect, but from knowing your own worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. The room froze after they mocked the janitor, and what came next changed everything. But the real change wasn't in the conference room or the apologies or the revelation of connection to power. The real change was in Marcus, who finally understood that he'd never been invisible at all. He'd just been waiting for permission to be seen. And he didn't need permission anymore. He was already enough.